Addiction science is an interdisciplinary science. So in our addiction studies module, we try to follow this interdisciplinarity, and we try to include all different approaches that contribute to addiction science. So even though this is a psychological program in general, we also include results and theoretical issues from social sciences, cultural approach, as well as genetics and neurobiological approaches, and of course personality psychology and other psychological theories. So we try to use all those information, all those scientific results which contribute to addiction science, as we see this problem as an interdisciplinary issue. Also, we are searching for a balance between theory, methodology, and the research itself. So we, in the first two classes of this module, we try to provide a theoretical basis, and in these two classes there are also options for different classes where students can hear about different addiction approaches, where they can learn about behavioral addictions as well as chemical addictions, and about the relationship between different psychiatric disorders and addiction problems, about the relationship between trauma and addiction disorders, also psychoanalytic approaches of addiction issues, and many other topics are discussed here. The third class in the module is a kind of journal club or a reading club, where we have the possibility to read and discuss and analyze recent papers published in addiction field. And then we have two other classes. The first is a methodological one, where we provide knowledge on different methodological issues from epidemiology to qualitative studies, and we also discuss the different statistical methods that can be used when analyzing data. And finally, we have a research fieldwork class, which is already doing the research. So it's we try to build up this program as a mixture of theory, methodology, and the research. So we are quite research focused, and we try to encourage our students to be able to carry out scientific studies and publish in scientific journals when they fulfill this module. This course tries to discuss different theories in the background of addiction process and dependence, and we have an emphasis on making it clear that addiction is a multi-causal disorder, and because of this we discuss both biological, psychological, and social theories of addiction process. So we try to examine the different theories on an empirical basis. So we follow the most recent literature explaining or providing different approaches to addiction, and we have a critical review to all those approaches, trying to understand addiction process as an interdisciplinary issue.
There are 3 courses I'm responsible for. The first, titled Relationship between Trauma and Addiction, is try to explore the possible role of trauma in the development and maintenance of addiction. And our view is that trauma can be conceptualized as an early risk factor in the development of addiction. And based on this view, we investigate the role of early relational trauma, such as emotional neglect, psychosocial deprivation, or abuse. How can these traumas can alter the development of brain and how this altered development can contribute to addiction. My second course is about emotional regulation in chemical and behavioral addiction, and this course takes a special emphasis on how dysregulated emotions or emotion regulation deficits can contribute to addiction. And for understanding the complex and crucial role of emotion regulation in addiction, we will take a deep look in contemporary theories on emotion regulation and on research findings on emotion regulation in a multidisciplinary framework, and then we will convert this knowledge into the field of addiction. And my third course is purely a methodological one, if I can say this, and the aim of this course is to give insight how population studies are executed from the first step till the one, and what I can promise is that this course will be a problem-oriented one.
So my course is about social cognitive models and self-regulation theories in addiction. And these approaches can help us to understand why people start using drugs, why they start experiment with smoking, marijuana, and so on. And self-regulation theories also explain why it's so difficult to quit smoking or quit drugs or give up any alcohol. So social cognitive models helps us to understand why kids, adolescents start to experiment with smoking, and these models also helps us to develop effective intervention to promote smoking cessation in adolescents or to prevent the experimentation. The self-regulation theories also explain why it's so difficult to quit smoking or quit alcohol or give up any drug use. And two different types of failure in self-regulation can explain these difficulties. One approach is emphasizing the under-regulation. Some people have difficulties to face with craving or to change their behavior in order to avoid the temptation of drug use. And the other form of failure is misregulation, when the patients or the drug users use the drug for different reasons, for example, affect regulation. And this course can help us to understand these processes, and we focus on several questions which informs the research or the prevention or the treatment works.
Evaluation of human interventions is the title of this new topic under the addictology module. You probably know that there is a lot of efforts and resources which are spent on developing a new pharmaceutical drug. On this slide you can see the procedure and also can see the number of years spent on it, and also you can see the amount of money spent on developing a new pharmaceutical drug. Here in this slide you can also see the procedure from a different perspective. And you can see the amount of money spent on this issue, which is approximately 800 or 900 million US dollars, which is spent on the development of a new pharmaceutical drug within 12-16 years. If you look into the different reports, we can see that the same amount and the same length of the period is stated in them. The situation is very much different if you look into the human interventions. For instance, prevention programs, health promotion programs, even if we look into psychotherapy. We can say that though a lot of resources and money is spent on the development of a new pharmaceutical drug, at the same time very few is spent on the development and on trialing human interventions. The main purpose of the course is to deal with this issue. What shall we do in order to make more and more scientific research into the evaluation of human interventions? There are some dilemmas and challenges in this regard. For instance, the evaluation of human interventions, prevention programs and stuff like that is not the integral part of the scientific culture of our scientific community. The development of high-quality interventions is not that high on the political or the policy agenda, whereas the accountability is much more important, especially if we are dealing with different type grant schemes where the accountability which counts. Evaluation research is not sufficiently prestigious among scientists. It's understandable because evaluation research is always applied research. And applied research doesn't have that high prestige among scientists. Here you can see the different topics we are planning to discuss during the course. Different types of intervention evaluation will be presented. What do we concentrate on? Do we concentrate on the outputs, on the outcomes, on the impact, or rather on the process? We will be investigating the different research designs. And the different type of data collection systems, if we are rather collecting qualitative data or quantitative data. And also we will have to look into the needs assessment. This is an issue on the agenda always when we are speaking about intervention planning, because it's very difficult, and in some cases we can also say seemingly useless not to collect needs assessment related data, because the needs-driven interventions are supposed to be the good interventions. We can perceive an overwhelming power and prevalence of randomized controlled trial arrangements in general in the science, in the authentic science, so to say. We can ask, and it's fair to ask, if randomized controlled trials are the only way to gather appropriate evidence. When we are doing evaluation research, the question is if the intervention works properly or not. So it is very important to find the appropriate way for collecting the appropriate data. And when we are not able to say that something is properly evidenced that it works, then we have to use, we are not able to use the evidence. What we have is the so-called best practice. So we will have to look into the best practice. How do we investigate? What can be considered to be a best practice? And what are the databases which inform us about the best practices? We will also look into the relationship between intervention planning and the efficacy and effectiveness of the interventions. It's very frequently said that it is difficult to get reliable data on the effectiveness of a program. And even if we are able to get the appropriate amount of data, we don't necessarily have the time needed for that. So in that case, it is important to know if a good planning can substitute evaluation research. So we will look into this element also. We will certainly investigate the different models of evaluation research. I will show you some of them just to learn how to do our own work. And finally, we will look into the question or the problem of the difference between evaluation and accreditation. As an example, we'll be investigating in details the European Drug Prevention Quality Standards Project. And what we are hoping by the end of the course, of course we are hoping that an evaluation culture would be developed. So on this slide you can see a part of a cartoon. On this cartoon you see people working in a lab and they seem to be very happy and partly ironic, because one of them is happy to see that very simple beings, not human beings, very simple creatures are developing an evaluation culture. Finally, they managed to develop an evaluation culture. The other one is saying that it would be great if we could distribute this evaluation culture among our fellow colleagues. But the third one arrives at the reality and is saying, hey guys, look, these little ones are forming subcommittees and they are disputing the results. And that's what we are hoping for, that we'll be able to develop the evaluation culture, we will be able to distribute it, and then we will be well prepared or correctly prepared to be able to dispute our results.
Until most recently, addiction problems were dominantly considered as being related to different chemical substances, namely psychoactive substances. However, in the recent years, we talk more and more about those addictions which are not related to psychoactive substances, and these are called altogether as behavioral addictions. And this course aims to discuss all these addictions, or all those disorders which are very similar to chemical addictions in their symptomatology, in their etiological background, and in the comorbidity and other processes. However, they are not related to substances. These are like gambling disorder, like internet gaming disorder, or compulsive buying, or trichotillomania, or many other behaviors which are very similar to chemical addictions and could be considered as addictions. The aim of this course is to present these different disorders which are not classified at the moment as behavioral addictions. However, they can be understood and they can be explained as addictions. And we discuss the symptomatology of these disorders, we discuss their epidemiology, etiological factors, as well as possible therapeutic interventions regarding these problems. Current addiction research. It is very important in our program to follow the most recent literature, and this course has the aim to read the important papers published in the addiction field. So this course is a kind of journal club where the students have the possibility to read, interpret and discuss the most recent scientific papers in addiction field, and that helps on one side to deepen our knowledge regarding the most recent literature, and also it can contribute to the writing skills. So we hope that reading more scientific papers, it also develops the skills for further writing. Systematic literature review and meta-analysis. There are many scientific papers published each month on addiction issues, and it becomes more and more difficult to review all this scientific knowledge and to summarize it and to find the core findings. And this course aims to have the skills and the ability to do such a review. So we study here how to carry out a systematic literature review or how to carry out a meta-analysis in order to be able to set up a good question regarding a specific topic in addiction science, and then being able to collect the relevant literature and to analyze the relevant literature regarding it.
We study addiction, illness and recovery narratives. The narratives are accounts that people make of their own lives to create recognizable, continuous and meaningful subjectivity within the terms of available discursive resources. What are the discursive resources? We can identify two repositories. The first is the cultural stock of stories or master narratives. For example, conversion or confession narratives concerning becoming an ill, progression or growth narratives from the illness to a healthy state, a journey from the illness to a healthy state, restitution narratives from an illness, and quest narrative because the illness. And the last one is the Alcoholics Anonymous or 12 Steps narratives. The second repository is the personal stock of stories. For example, the transformation from the spoiled, addicted identity, according to Goffman, to a recovered, non-addict identity. It means accepting myself, cared for myself, spiritual rebirth, and freeing myself from unfitting social expectations. We can study the content of repositories and the way narrative goes to the repository. Recovery narratives. What are the recovery narratives like? Recovery narratives are comprised the process of becoming the author of person's life in the recovery and change process. Recovery individuals don't talk about their symptoms passing, but tell a story about their selves. So the focus is the self, the changing self, or the changing identity. Study questions are focused on this process. Therapy. The study questions on narratives emphasize the role of therapy. What's the role of therapy in the frame of narratives? In case of the two repositories, the study questions are asking about variability, richness, relevantness, congruence, and so on of the narratives, and the access to them by the addict person. The therapy can facilitate choosing the appropriate narratives from the repositories and help the addict person to create and compose his or her personal narrative of recovery. The question is how the therapy or the therapist facilitate the composing process of narrative. What's the way the therapist becomes the co-author or the co-composer of the addicted person's narrative?
The addiction studies module is a very much research-focused module. That means that from the very first moment we encourage our students to get involved in different research projects and to start their own research project in order to fulfill their PhD and be able to write papers at the second part of their studies and to be able to write a thesis at the end of their studies. Our department, the Department of Clinical Psychology and Addiction, which is behind the addiction module, does research at different addiction fields and also with different approaches or different methods. That means that we do epidemiological studies both in general population, among adolescents, and in adult population as well, but we do also epidemiological studies in specific or special populations. We also do studies focusing on personality psychology background of addiction problems. We also do some psychogenetic studies, and we also do some evaluation studies which focuses on the understanding or evaluating different interventions or prevention methods. And regarding the topics, we have also different focuses. So we do research on smoking as well as alcohol use, but also we do some studies on other illegal substances, and we have a special interest in researching behavioral addictions such as internet addiction, or more recently what we call internet gaming addiction. But we do also studies on compulsive buying or exercise addiction, and recently trichotillomania, and many other topics.
Researchers on psychoactive substance use have concerned the issue of emotions in many ways. In the last 2 decades, however, a few emotional intelligence studies have raised the issue that different emotional competencies might have a role in substance use. Our systematic review highlighted that it would be worth conducting more research concerning this issue. Therefore, we have started doing researches asking both adolescent and adult populations, abstinent people and drug users. Among adolescents, we found that although emotional competencies are not key factors of drug use, they are individual explanatory terms compared to self-esteem and depressive tendencies. Moreover, single and multiple variable statistical methods suggested that emotional regulation problems are associated with more frequent substance use-related problems. Results of our studies among adults pointed out that the complexity of emotions and the ability of regulating emotions clearly differentiates between abstinent, occasional, and problem substance users. Emotions are most differentiated in case of abstinent persons, followed by the smoker, occasional drinkers, and polydrug users have the least complex emotions. Therefore, the more regular the substance use, the less differentiated are the emotions. And regarding emotion regulation, substance user groups have worse emotional competencies than occasional users, experimenters, or abstinents. These results are very much in line with psychodynamic theories and clinical observations suggesting that addicted persons turn to psychoactive substances due to their emotional problems and deficits regarding managing and regulating them. In the future, we are planning to explore the possible moderator and mediator factors, explaining the relationship between emotional intelligence and substance use.
My research group, the Memory and Language Lab, is investigating implicit skill learning, which underlies motor skills, cognitive skills and social skills. But what is more important, it is related to habit formation and habit change, which is important in addiction. So we investigated habit formation in kids and adulthood and older ages, and we found that kids are much better in this fundamental learning mechanism, which is a little bit surprising. After that, we tried to find out how can we boost implicit skill learning, and we found that hypnosis can boost implicit learning. So to discover implicit learning, it's very important to understand habit formation and habit change.
So here is a brain stimulation device that we use to directly manipulate brain activity of specific brain regions. And for example, now we are running an experiment where we investigate the neurocognitive background of habit formation and habit change. Here we use anodal transcranial direct current stimulation. That means that we have an anodal electrode that is placed over the left or the right prefrontal cortex. In this case, it is placed on the left prefrontal cortex, and we have a so-called reference or cathodal electrode that is placed on the top of the head. And a participant receives 10-minute long brain stimulation during a learning task, and we use this learning task to measure habit formation. And then 12 hours later we retest participants on the same task, and preliminary results show that participants remember more if they received stimulation to the right prefrontal cortex compared to the left, and if this stimulation was followed by sleep in the 12-hour delay period.
In a recent study, we have examined massively multiplayer online games, and we were especially interested in the motivational background of these games. So we wanted to understand why do people play these games, so what's the reasons behind playing. And in this study we could identify 7 different dimensions or 7 different motifs in the background of online gaming. That is social motives, escapism, competition, coping, skill development, fantasy, and recreational motives. So these 7 dimensions could explain the background, the motivational background of gaming. What is quite interesting that when looking at different types of games, so we compared first-person shooting games to strategy games or other types of games, then we found that in the background of different types of games we could identify different types of motives. And even more interestingly, we also found that if we examine the level of problems related to playing these games, because we see that in many cases playing online games is a recreational activity, but at a certain proportion of gamers there are problems also related to playing, and even addiction can occur. So if we look at the background of problematic gaming, then we see that escapism is maybe the most relevant factor. So those who play in order to escape from the real world or to avoid problems, they are the most vulnerable people regarding to having problems or becoming addicted to online games.